Good morning, everyone. This is Sean Palis with ProSymmetry. I'll be walking you through today's webinar on why using Excel for resource planning is bad business. All right, I got the thumbs up that everyone can see my screen and hear, so let's get going. Okay, so we're not trying to scare you, maybe a little bit, but the goal here is really to drive you to a much more effective solution with fairly minimal effort. Don't be ashamed or embarrassed. Odds are there are much worse situations out there of folks using Excel for resource management. In fact, up on the screen at the moment, I have one of our longest subscribing customers, and this is a slide taken from a presentation they did a number of years ago. They've been with us, I think, 8 years. There's now 7 or 8 different business units that have moved off of Excel to use Tempus Resource, our product. And this was the base case they started with. This was an R&D organization, over 2,000 resources with over 1,000 Excel files. I didn't make this up. This comes from them. So these challenges are real. This is our number 1, 2, and 3 competitor is Excel. And on today's webinar, we'll talk through how this is such a challenge and such bad business for those that go down that route. But again, you're not alone. The nice part is there is a solution, and we will walk through that today. So lots of folks are in the same boat as you. So don't feel bad or ashamed about the scenario. Okay, so here's the agenda. Lots of folks on today that are in portfolio management, project management, resource management space. So I wanted to show this as more of a Gantt style layout. So we'll do the obligatory intro about us, who we are. Sorry, we've got to do that. It's a webinar, so I've got to take 2 or 3 slides, maybe 4, kind of tell you who we are, maybe make an offer to you. Then we'll take a look at what I consider the top 5 reasons using Excel for resource management is bad business. In reality, we could probably spend 2 days locked up in a room discussing all of the reasons Excel is bad for resource management, but we're going to limit it to 5. And I've done my best to sort of condense the big ones. Then we'll talk about how we can very quickly move from an Excel file to an enterprise system that looks and feels a lot like Excel very quickly. And then we'll take a short walk through our product Tempus, walking through those key elements and those top 5 reasons of how do we address that with an enterprise solution. And then we'll do a quick offer and then a closeout. We have an hour reserved. We'll take up probably the majority of that. And then of course, if there's questions, please submit them now or send them in later. But this is what today's webinar is going to look like. All right, moving on. So resource management is what we do. It's literally in our product name, Tempus Resource. We're in the Magic Quadrant. We're in multiple critical capability reports from Gartner. We're in the market guide for strategic portfolio management. We have over a dozen case studies on our website. I think we have something close to 100 videos on YouTube, and we have tons of additional content on our website all around resource management. So we do this stuff all the time. What I'm showing on the screen is how we rate through the Gartner peer review, peer insight interface. You're free to go look at this on your own. There's tons of great reviews, things written up by our customers. And what I've done here is I've highlighted some of the most critical elements around resource management. Clearly, we do lots of other stuff within Tempus Resource, but one I would call out is scalability. You want to make sure that any solution you look at can take on multiple groups and be able to change and handle that manipulation over time, and also scale to accommodate hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of resources over time. We're rated as high as you can get in capacity and resource management. That's kind of a big deal and what we're discussing on today's call. So I thought that was germane. Obviously, security and user management is huge and critical, and you see we rank very highly there. Throughout today's discussion, you'll see a number of places where this challenge can result in multiple silos and an explosion in the number of Excel files that are needed to deliver on some vision of resource management with Excel. All of them bad, but moving to Tempus again solves that. And then usability. Excel, for all its fault, People like it because it's easy to use and easy to get started. That's also sort of a paradox of why it's such a problem. But any tooling you move to needs to rank very highly in usability, especially moving from Excel. Folks will expect the look and feel and interface like Excel with enterprise capabilities. All right, so you're free to go check these out on your own, all about us. I will also mention we rank very highly on integration. Most of our customers use Tempest standalone, moving off of Excel or maybe another, sort of PPM, HCM type tooling. And many of them also have additional or supplemental systems: Workday, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Teammate Plus, Project Server, Jira. We have connectors, both API-based, plugin-based. Some are native in the product, others are connectors that allow you to federate all of those data into Tempest for a holistic view, that single pane of glass inside of Tempest, and manage your resources there. I took the single pane of glass thing from a call I did earlier this week with Microsoft. I stole it from them. I love that. I haven't heard in a while, but Tempest offers that capability to unify these data across all of these systems, none of which deliver on the true vision of resource management. And of course, today we're talking about Excel and how it does it. All right, last slide before we actually jump into the core of today's presentation. And this is an offer. We are more than willing to offer you a free trial of our service, evaluating the current state of your resource management spreadsheets or similar tooling like Excel. We'll import your data into Tempest, configure Tempest, create reports, train you on it, and prove that we can resolve this challenge for you very quickly. No strings attached, totally free. It's up to you if you wish to do so. You can email us from this webinar. You can go to our website and submit for a free trial. But want to make sure this offer is front and center. We'll talk about it at the end as well, but wanted to get it out there right now in case you have to drop early or for some other reason. All right, so this is an offer from us to you. Okay, so now we're getting into the interesting stuff, and I love this slide. This is like my favorite. Okay, so this is kind of the scenario that many of our customers find themselves in. They set out to fix their resource management challenge. They need a solution, and they grab what they're comfortable with, which is Excel. They quickly spin up a file. They list out projects and resources and put together some semblance of a forecast. They just need some projects and resources, and that's not entirely wrong. And they have this view now of what's happening across the organization, and their confidence is high, their hope is really high, and maybe for the first couple of days, maybe even months, it feels really good. Like, hey, this is sustainable. This is something I can really help drive in the organization. When they start socializing it and now capturing updates and interacting with others, things change a little bit, and they start to realize that they're not looking at reaching the top of a mountain, but instead they've run into a gigantic iceberg, because there is so much more to resource management, and Excel quickly becomes a dead end. This might be high, but at least 90% of the elements needed to successfully implement resource management, even at an immature level, a low level of maturity, are below the surface and are not achievable effectively through Excel. How will you handle resource-based capacity, which is a time-phase data set? How will you handle net capacity? That's before we even allocate people to work or generic placeholders to work. What about absences? What about BAU work and other things that consume people's time beyond direct project assignments? What about the status of assignments? Are they approved? Are they rejected? Is a manager required to look at that and give you the thumbs up? How do we calculate net availability? So how do we get our gap analyses? How do we get our shale and mountain charts? What about actuals? It's not connected to a timesheet, so now I have to integrate timesheeting data, or actuals have to be directly input for my forecast to be rolling. What about my resources' primary and secondary roles for when I do replacements, or when I do roll-ups, or when I do gap analyses by those factors, which are critical? And what about skills? Skills have become a really important aspect for both increasing and improving the in-house talent, but also recruiting. Where do we have skill deficiencies across the business? Where do I have to go out to the market 6, 12, 18 months and find talent. The market has gotten so competitive, especially for those competitive skill sets. AI resources, cybersecurity resources, those are just top of mind, but there are many others that are very difficult to attract, retain, find. You're talking, well over a year potentially to find those folks. And then we get into things like the allocation units. If you're planning in your spreadsheet by hours, that's great. But what about FTE? What about headcount? What about percentage allocation? What about costs? What about person days? Surely others in your organization want to know, either report on it or see it in those different units. And the same goes for planning granularity. I might have built my spreadsheet to plan by month, but what if the organization really needs it by week? Or what if it's really by quarter? Or what if it's a fiscal period I'm planning, but I just put weeks in my spreadsheet? You're talking about now a re-architecting of what you've put together. And then we get into things like concurrency. If you're the single person managing this spreadsheet, which is going to be like every scenario, you've already hit the wall of Excel. You're not going to have a concurrent editing mechanism where you can seamlessly edit the file at the same time, and you open up a whole additional set of problems if you try that. Then we get into things like rates. What about if there's escalating rates, rate overrides? What about our financial forecasts? So again, there's just so much more to this that there's a lot of false hope out of the gate because you feel like you accomplished something. You got it out there, it's done. But the minute it starts interacting with the business, you're going to find that it's a much bigger challenge than you'd expected. Okay, so let's move into the top 5 reasons Excel is bad for business. And look, I apologize for some of these titles at the top. I'm doing my best to jam together a lot of different things because Excel, the problems around it are so vast. So non-diversification and transferability risk sounds like something out of an academic environment. Didn't mean it to sound that way, but it does really encapsulate, some of the real problems. And on this front, we think about, ease of use of the spreadsheet really just tricks everyone. Yeah, sure, it can do just about everything when you get started, but it very quickly becomes an impossible mess. Think of the spreadsheets you maintain for any purposes in your business outside of resource management. You start with the basics, you feel really confident, everything's working as expected. You tell yourself you're going to really make this thing usable and you're in it for the long haul. Well, a few hours, days, or weeks go by, and suddenly you realize you need to incorporate a new field. Then maybe you need to change the formatting. Then you realize the reporting requirements are slightly different. So now you need to scale the simple table you started with to include a new calculated data table, a series of pivot tables, a power pivot. You know how this goes, you've been there. What started as something simple quickly becomes totally overwhelming. I mean, I can cite, my job requires me to update an MRR, monthly recurring revenue report, which started as something very basic, a listing of customers and contracts and those values. Then it had to be time series. Well, when you time series, what time granularity? What are the contract dates? How are those spread? What currency is used? How and when do you apply the currency conversion? What about customer details? Do I need industry, location, sales tax data? So again, these problems start with, hey, I'll spin up a spreadsheet. And then they suddenly get much, much more complicated. And without a purpose-built system, you run into these types of problems where suddenly the complexity grows at an exponential rate and becomes very difficult to manage and maintain and almost impossible to move along and transfer it to someone that might ultimately take over for you. And that's the second point here. These spreadsheets, they're created, maintained, and operated by the same person. If that person's good, they're probably going to leave. I mean, they're not going to stay in the position of managing that spreadsheet if they did a really bang up job. There's some statistics shown on the screen here from the Microsoft Work Trend Index by Gallup, and these continue. People are moving and shifting roles within businesses and across businesses. So, keep in mind the current state of company retention metrics. And on the other side, think about if that person's really bad at this, then you're going to completely miss the mark. But in either case, the person who built this won't be in this position permanently. So how can it be transferred? Who will take ownership of this file once that person moves on? Right? So you have this domino effect for both the resource planning aspect as well as the individual career planning. And rarely are these spreadsheets created with the enterprise in mind or even a larger group. And these call outs that we have at this lady working on this Excel spreadsheet, these call outs are common. And I would think most of you are probably nodding your head. Hey, that calculation, I'll do it in sheet 5, just this once. I totally won't do that again. I'll just hide that column. I'll come back to that. Hey, Sean needs this one report. So we'll add some columns just to handle that. Where do you track and manage all of that configuration detail? Again, it just makes this so difficult to transfer on to other parties. Number 2, and again, look, are you likely to get hit with a fine for storing resource data in a spreadsheet? Most likely no. However, some of you, based on who's registered for this webinar, maybe it's possible. But there are people in your organization in compliance, privacy, and risk management that might want to have a word with you. GDPR and other data privacy legislation, it's only getting more complicated and complex, more restrictive, probably more expensive, not just penalties, but also the overhead and governance related to it. And if your organization is a signatory to any model clauses or standard contractual clauses under GDPR, or if your organization is subject to California privacy, Canadian privacy, or any other international framework, this is serious business, because the financial and reputational risk that comes along with compliance or failure to comply is real, and it's something to think of. The minute you start to capture people's names, that means you're in the business of PII, which is personally identifiable information. And yes, name and email, which seem really basic, simple stuff, that's considered PII. If your resource management spreadsheet expands to include roles, positions, skills, and other attributes, you've gotten even deeper into the web of privacy, compliance, and GDPR. And if you got into what are quote unquote called special categories of PII, then you're really in potentially some deep water. I would expect most of you that are in attendance from the US, the EU, this is unlikely, but we've worked with customers in other parts of the world that do keep what are considered special categories of data, and I'll let you look this up on your own in those spreadsheets, and that can be really problematic. If your spreadsheet is going to contain any of this PII, especially EU, UK, Swiss citizens, have you interacted with and have you planned for redress mechanisms for privacy-related inquiries? Your business likely has. Is there a conduit back to your spreadsheet? Maybe this doesn't impact your colleagues who are, gainfully employed, W-2 in the US, but what about when they leave? What about subcontractors? What about other contractors, temporary workers? The more time you spend thinking about this, the murkier it can become. Ultimately, your organization is in the position of not being able to protect these data because they just don't know where they are when they sit in these spreadsheets. And then, just thinking separately as an individual, putting myself in your shoes, do you want to be the person that goes and voluntarily discloses that you've been keeping all this stuff outside of a controlled, audited, protected system in a spreadsheet on your laptop or file share? I'll let you make that decision. So legal and regulatory risk has become, I think, a really critical aspect of why to avoid using Excel for resource management. Moving on to number 3, data quality design equals credibility risk. Again, I'm sorry for some of these titles, but I'm trying to jam a lot in here. Talking about data quality and data design, and I have a house of cards here, so I think you see where this is going. And you can even see where I say Excel guarantees near to midterm failure. I know it's a strong statement, but I do stand by it. We just see a huge volume of Excel-based RM tooling that fail, they collapse. Are there some out there that are wildly successful? Maybe. I really doubt it. I think this failure rate stems from the fact that the primary design that you select for how you input and manage data for resource management does not and will not match the data structures needed for the types of reports and analytics needed for even sort of maturity level 1 resource management. Everyone gets this wrong because it can't be done effectively in Excel. And one critical area is that the resource object itself needs to be an independent data set. And if you think about it or ask, well, why is that? Each resource has standard base capacity. And then you get a calculated net capacity based on calendars, PTO, maybe sustainment or support work you want to put within the definition of capacity. And these things can be expressed by hours or headcount, and they're expressed over time. It's not a one value fits all over the life of that resource. And then further, each resource has a range of metadata, including skills, roles, positions, titles, rates, and so on. And with Excel, all these separate data sets are just wind up getting jammed together into an output that serves as the basis for the data management. What I mean there is, instead of keeping these data in a proper structure, the maintenance, the design and maintenance of the input actually reflects what a report should look like. So you will typically see, and I don't have an example on the screen, but you'll typically see sort of your projects and your resources listed in columns A and B, and then you have a time series to the right where it just extends out. Might be weeks, might be months. Then you pop in the data. That generally would be an output from how the data would have been established it should be stored at rest. But folks generally want to achieve that output initially, so they input the data in that sort of jammed together interface. All right, and that lack of structuring results in these common issues that we see in hundreds of spreadsheets we get every month. We also find things like, resource names are mismatched between rows and assignments. You get the same resource misspelled and input as a result, like 6 different ways. There's Sean M, there's Sean P, there's Payless Sean. And without having a centralized separate resource pool that you pull from, that's one of the first challenges we see. We also get project names that are mismatched, where you get project names misspelled because they're not using an ID-based structure in that Excel file. They're just popping those names in, and oftentimes have disconnected sub-tabs where they might list those projects again using different names. And a lot of this will tie into some of the updating process of how do you capture and collect feedback, and where do you put that back into the file. You also have the challenge of the simple act of switching your time granularity. If I'm moving from weekly planning to monthly planning, it's not a single click. It's going to require either a complete re-architecting of the entire spreadsheet or a whole bunch of sub-tabs that you've got to cycle through. And where do you handle the conversions? And the same goes the conversions on units of measure. If you started planning by hours, but then want to move to headcount or person days or costs, you're probably going to have to create a series of linked subsheets to apply those conversions. And these are not insignificant things. Carrying on, when we get to the credibility risk, whatever you build in Excel is going to be based on a bottoms-up approach to resource management. The problems you're primarily trying to solve are those that are in your immediate view. It's a very selfish approach. I don't mean that in a negative way, but look, you're trying to solve a problem right in front of you, not for the wider organization. So what you've built won't align with the goals of the broader organization. So whether it's a group within R&D, all of IT, a product development organization, as you attempt to scale the spreadsheet to meet the needs of the wider organization, and I'm not saying 50,000 people, I'm talking about a scaled up group, let's say, that spreadsheet's going to implode. The Excel file designed for your specific objectives, how's it going to handle incorporating the needs and requirements of another group, and then another, and then another? Resistance to spreadsheets managed by somebody outside of a group you're trying to integrate, it's going to be super high. If you've ever tried to get someone to provide you with access to Workday or ServiceNow, those things are guarded like Fort Knox. Do you expect functional managers to just hand over their resource management data so it can sit in a spreadsheet that they don't control? I mean, they're going to fight that really aggressively. Also, there's going to be no effective mechanism to support security. With one centralized operator, how can sensitive work be input and maintained? This will lead, like we saw in almost the first slide, this is going to lead to other Excel files popping up and competing with yours for legitimacy. So you're going to have a battle that can come right from the process of getting other data and also implementing the lack of ability to implement security. But even if your response was, okay, I'm going to implement security in my file, how would you handle that? Are you going to break up the file and keep separate ones and bring them together? Are you going to Are you going to email the sub file to somebody else who then updates the file and sends it back to you so that you can merge it back in? That's a nightmare to me, but in any case, totally unsustainable. The other factor at risk here around credibility is there's no audit log. Is everyone going to trust that you're so perfect at data capture and data entry that everything's been put in correctly? How will you prove to them that you've correctly integrated their updates? You have no mechanism to prove them wrong. And as a result, any challenge they make to the quality of your work or the validity of the outputs, it'll be successful. And even if they're marginally successful in undercutting the credibility of the Excel file, it will be damaging. All right, so it's vulnerable and the credibility is at risk, like right out of the gate, just based on those factors. Moving on, number 4, data silos and inability to communicate. Originally I had this as inability to surface insights. And again, there's a lot going on here as well, I get it, but I think it becomes pretty self-apparent that when you leverage Excel for resource management, you're really only guaranteeing that more Excel files are going to pop up. So this gets back to some of what I mentioned earlier around security. And again, that Excel file you've created, it's designed, maintained, and operated by you. Others will seek to create their own versions. Again, remember when we talked earlier about the other groups protecting their data, this always leads to silos. Imagine when you're asking, they're going to say, I don't trust your file. We do it differently. You don't need to see our data. We have to secure our plans. These are all going to be points of pushback, and they're entirely valid. So they're ones you could potentially attempt to overcome, but they do raise valid point, attacking the credibility as well, but also just the fundamentals of Excel not being able to address these. Excel just isn't designed to provide that type of security, data protection, access rules, and policies that you need for true resource management. But when it comes to, let's say you get past that, and when it comes to sharing or surfacing the data, you also have very real and practical challenges. You can see in this sort of process steps I have below, how are you going to actually share the data? You're just going to make a copy of the file, then format it and reformat it, clean it, distribute it. You're going to send it by email. Like, what do those mechanics look like? Because it has to be repeatable for people to do this over and over again. And then what happens when a change is requested? So if I've gotten the data and I make a change and recommend a change to you, are you going to change the source data that produced the output? Or are you going to create a cloned copy and make the change there? And ultimately, should it have gone back in the source data? So now we have an issue of, well, where should those data flow back to? And then also, what version is the person using when making decisions? Because it won't be, for most companies, make this one change and I'll talk to you in a month. It's going to be fairly repetitive. And when we get to number 5, it's going to get very interactive. All right, but so when you keep track of the changes, what do? Do you put like a little date at the end of the file? Like, oh, here's the file for you, 1/22/2024. But what if you send it twice in a day? Do you then put like a little A and B at the end of it? Or an I? Like, I mean, very real challenge of which, if I'm consuming the data or I need to interact with you, which one am I using? Of course, it's also a snapshot in time, which is another major problem. We'll talk about that in a moment. In fact, just relating to a personal scenario, we interviewed someone yesterday, and they had mentioned that in their job, they spend hours duplicating data from multiple systems into Excel and then generate reports. And we see this with most of our customers that come to us from Excel. I mean, could you imagine a bigger waste of time? You know it, you're living it. And we've had other customers, which it's really been phenomenal to see. They start working with us. They had come to us with an Excel file that federates data from multiple systems, and they would spend days every week. So adding up to, more than half of an FTE per year, just updating that Excel file. And once they engaged with us and we were drilling into the integrations and how they were bringing data together, we found out through our analysis back to them is that what they had been creating in Excel was wrong. I mean, they have literally for the past 2 or 3 years been interacting with executives wrong data. I mean, they had literally been sabotaging the whole business as a result of leveraging Excel for their resource management planning. I mean, it's really just staggering to see a real world example of Excel scaling to that level, and then just how poorly it performed and the risks it posed to the organization. Thankfully, we were able to fix that. And then number 5 is ineffective for business demands. And most importantly, and I didn't have space up top, is that it's not timely. So let's say you've through hard work, perseverance, you've gotten there, you built this incredible Excel file, hey, great job, you did it. At some point, after you've socialized this to management and you're getting attention and people know, hey, Sean did it, Sean's got that amazing Excel file. Business is totally going to change now. You're going to become a victim of your own success. And here's why. Because the fun's going to start when they start coming to you, when management says, hey, Sean's got that great Excel file. Our business is dynamic, it's changing, we have to be agile, we have to go up against competitors, it's a global marketplace. We got to get stuff quick and make decisions. So let's go to Sean. They'll want and expect timely responses around common scenarios. And I've got about 20 of them in that on the screen at the moment. They may ask, well, hey, what if we delay this project? How many projects of type X can we do next year? What if we cancel this program or cancel this group of projects? As a result, what roles are most constrained or impacted? Give me options for resolving over allocations for our cybersecurity group or our design engineers. And it won't just be one question. It's going to be more like a decision tree. It's going to be, well, hey, how does this look? Okay, now what about these 10 things? Then what about these? Hey, back out of those. So it's not just to give me this one scenario and we'll go with it. They're going to expect a very dynamic and iterative process that isn't just going to be a quick one-off. Now, let's assume that you're prepared to do this with your Excel file. You invested all that time, you feel super confident. Excel can do anything. It's the greatest thing ever. It solves everything. And you say yes. Again, refer back to number 3 and 4 because your Excel file is about to explode. Like, you're going to have so many tabs, you'll need another Excel file just to keep track of them. And if you decide to fight it out and actually work through a response, how are you going to handle all the follow-up inquiries and changes? Can you do this, again, really important, can you do this in a timely fashion? At what point will you just say enough and jump ship and say, I'm done, I'm just not responding, I'm going to find another job, I'm going to move on, I'm going to push back, which again, go back to slide 3, now again, back to that credibility challenge, right? Now, if let's say you did stick it out and you were able to get through one of those analyses, again, how are you going to share it? Are you going to send a file? The file, again, is based on a snapshot of data. Maybe you did all this work, you were able to buy some time, and it took you 2 days. All right, now you send that out. In the meantime, there's been new projects, resource changing, adjustments to assignment data. You are working off of, and they're working off of a snapshot, a point in time, which gets really stale really quickly. So now, hey, Sean, we need that same analysis, but go incorporate all those changes from the last couple of days because they're material. And by the way, add these additional scenarios into your analysis. It's just totally not sustainable. Excel just can't handle it. And even if it's your only job, Excel will limit how timely you can be with the responses to management. It's just, again, unsustainable. All right. So those are my top 5 reasons why Excel for resource management is bad for business. I hope some of that resonated. What I'd like to do next is walk you through our product. Tempus Resource is designed to solve this problem. This can live side by side with other tools. So don't think, well, hey, we have tool A, tool B. Trust me, they're not designed around the resource object and resource management, which is where we live. And the beauty is with Tempus, we can very easily solve this problem. So let me jump into a live instance of Tempus. And I want to walk you through a few things and not take up a huge amount of time doing a very deep, involved demo. We're happy to schedule a separate meeting where we can go into great detail, even again, importing your data under NDA if you'd like, or you can obfuscate it and you can see for yourself. But the first thing to call out is, again, Tempus is an enterprise application. Our customers are all over the world. About 40% of them are outside of the United States. Generally resource pools, certainly greater than 50. We have most of our customers are beyond 500 resources, with many above 1,000 and some nearly 100,000. So we can accommodate and scale to very large organizations and also accommodate different methodologies, different data structures, different security, all within one instance, which is going to be critical as you scale your environment. First thing I will call out is that the product includes a tamper-proof audit log. Every change made by every user at any point in time is retained, and you get to see the before and after effect of any of those changes. Again, getting back to credibility and trust, system has to have an audit log that will tell a user who changed that field, who made that assignment, who deleted that object. All of that needs to be part of the system, and I have to be able to go back and see and even generate statistics off of this information, but at a minimum, feel confident in my data by understanding this audit log. So this is a critical foundational aspect of our system. Now moving on to some other areas, one question might be, well, I have all these Excel files, how do I get them in? Tempus includes a range of built-in upload capabilities. So under data sync, if we go to Excel here, come on, play nicely, there we go, live demos, excellent. And we go to Excel. Now, your Excel file can typically be deconstituted into project inventory, resource inventory, assignment data, maybe skills, and the list goes on and on. We have a range of pre-built upload utilities with their own templates that allow you to rapidly break your file up into these import files for mass import. We can import thousands of projects, thousands of resources, thousands of attributes. So literally the data model that you're using can get imported to Tempus all through these Excel uploads. And we can walk you through this as part of a trial. We can do this for you. So it's exceptionally easy to do. What you'll also find in the product, we jump back to admin settings here, is we have a whole panel dedicated to security. We have role management, we have project and resource access policies. This allows you to design very basic security protocols, but then also incorporate much more elaborate and granular security requirements and protocols to ensure that different groups have their data broken out separately and are protected from the eyes of others across the organization. So we can very easily accommodate those most complicated security environments. Now, one of the fundamental objects of Tempus is the resource object itself. Our resource management interface here, we can accommodate tens of thousands of resources, named and generic. We can create unlimited number of views. We can quickly gain insight into availability of resources on the fly from within these heat maps and drill down and drill through, all of that fully accounted for, and also fully support inline editing. So reorgs, very simple to accommodate, and we also support merging with Excel uploads. But if we drill down into any particular resource, you'll see that we have a host of configurable screens, including any attributes you want to capture, resource hierarchies, skills, roles, positions, titles, security details, rates, rate structures, and there's even global replace functions. So if someone leaves, you can backfill across the entire organization with an open rec or a to be hired resource. We also have that sub data set, the resources time phase capacity, along with calendars, non-working time. So we have both base and net capacity by hours and headcount. And then as we drill down further, we can store and track files for our resources, resumes, CVs, certifications, other training materials. We have configurable sheets if you wanted to list out different training classes or other details. So these are sort of configurable data sets. And then of course, a skills matrix that allows us to build out or allow the end user to submit to the system their skill levels using ranges, Boolean fields, and other selection options. You can also apply dates for skill expirations as well. With our skills and resources populated, we then have our inventory of projects. We allow you to edit your allocations and forecasts for resources at the project level or task level on a project by project basis, or more commonly, and this is one of our key differentiators, is we have a bulk planning interface. This allows us to essentially create mass planning screens that are going to look and feel a lot like Excel, where I can see and concurrently edit my data, real-time heat mapping, resource request workflows, AI and machine learning based resource replacement capabilities, along with the ability to seamlessly transition between different levels of granularity, day, week, month, quarter, year, fiscal month, fiscal quarter, and also seamlessly transition between different units of measure, hours cost, FTE, FT percentage, person days, as well as Gantt views. These views can also show us remaining availability by resource, by role, by position, by title, all fully configurable by you. So this is why many people feel super confident and comfortable moving to Tempest from, excuse me, their current system, is that they can very quickly identify and interact with screens that look and feel a whole lot like Excel. So you're going to see Excel-based screens here, bulk selects. We can identify min, max, average, quickly change our time frames, maybe the next 6 months, the next year, advanced filtering options, and the like. So again, going to feel a lot like Excel and give you very advanced enterprise level capabilities for resource planning. Now moving on to reporting, instead of having to dump all this data to some other place or spin up additional tabs in your Excel file, all of that reporting fully available inside of Tempest. We have basic reporting, we have advanced reporting, we can leverage all of our data, whether it's skills data, allocation data, even up to and including data science related predictive analytics that can be made available inside of Tempest. These can be distributed to anybody in your organization. So again, you don't have to worry about, hey, how do I share this data? It's live inside of these reporting views. Users can create their own views if granted rights to do so, and you can share these views either through email-based delivery, scheduled delivery, or through direct access. All right, now the last thing that I'll bring up, and I should also mention that we do fully support timesheeting. So if you wanted to use timesheets inside of Tempest, that's fully supported. But the most critical aspect, and always has been as a key differentiator for us, is this scenario analysis, what if analysis capability. Modeling your projects, your portfolios, your programs, the flow of work through your organization, identifying bottlenecks, deficiencies, and challenges as you design your portfolio and as you react to questions from the business. Those questions around, what if we cancel a project? What if we shift a project? What if we move the individual tasks? What if we cancel tasks? What if we expand or cut projects into multiple pieces? And or the most base case here of, let's see if I have any save changes, none in this case. Under purchases, as an example, look at our purchasing group and I see different people. You know, perhaps I want to understand what's driving Sean's allocation here, and I see it's Hypersonics 2. Let's snap to it. There's Hypersonics 2, and I simply want to see the effects of what if we cancel or what if this is shifted. In real time, as I shift this, I can see the live impact across my portfolio, both in terms of allocation, work, net availability, my gap analysis, as well as my financials. So I can look at my challenges and identify where do I have gaps now, having made that one particular change by hours, by FTEs, by person days, by percentage. So very quickly I can identify my gaps and see what I need in order to achieve this. And there's other tooling in the product that help us identify if I want to do something at a particular point and want to ask the product, when can this actually take place? We have this opportunity map feature. In this case, I have no options for when I can deliver on this project. Let's see if I can find another. It's always the risk of live demos. Let's see, not having prep for it. This one also might return 0. Nope. So, and we've intentionally created a really nasty data set, but between now and the end of my model, there's only 2 cases of where I can do this project, and the maximum of what I can get is 28%. I can drill in and see why, but this is incredibly powerful stuff, in particular if you're integrating Tempest with your CRM. So if you have a list of projects coming down the pike that you're bidding on, you're trying to award, you don't know if you're going to win them or not, or if you're in IT, you simply have them as an intake inside of Tempest. We support, project-driven intake workflows and business case development. You can see if I'm going to award or choose to accept that particular proposal, when can it fit into my portfolio? It's also very powerful to answer the same question for existing in-flight projects. Imagine, and this might be more common for many organizations, if I ask you, take that project and tell me where else I can do it. Effectively taking it out of the portfolio and adding it back in, where can it fit? And Tempest can do all of that work for you live and in real time. You don't have to set up a commitment to respond to somebody hours later. You could literally open up a Teams session, Zoom meeting, whatever it is, and walk through those scenarios live with management, and it will ensure credibility to you and the group that have leveraged Tempest, and certainly way beyond what you'd expect from Excel. All right, so let's wrap things up, just keeping a look at time limits here. Again, the offer stands, no strings attached. We'll do this under NDA if you'd like. Free 30-day trial, send us your data. We'll import it, configure Tempest, configure reporting, train you up, and we'll prove out that Tempest is a simple journey. It's very easy to get on board, very easy to use, and will save you a lot of headache compared to Excel. So happy to deliver this offer. Two last things I'll bring up, and then we'll wrap things up for the day. Upcoming shows, if you're out and about and wanted to come meet with us or the team, of course, reach out anytime. We're happy to do follow-up demos and other activities. Next month, we'll be at the Institute for Internal Auditors, the Global Audit Management Show in Las Vegas. In Q2, we'll be at the Resource Management Institute Global Symposium in Indianapolis. That's in April. And then in May, we'll be at the Gartner Application Innovation and Business Solutions Summit in Las Vegas. We'll also be, I apologize, at the PMI Global Summit in Berlin. That's also in April. And then we'll be at the House of PMO event in London in June. Beyond the in-person shows, we have a number of upcoming webinars. Obviously, you just sat through the using Excel for resource planning is bad business. In March, we have a webinar discussing how to do resource planning and connect with project and portfolio prioritization. That's happening March 21st. And then in April, we have one that's more audit focused around, is your audit plan actually achievable? I would say that anyone interested in understanding resource planning under constraints would benefit from attending, because the audit plan for most other organizations, IT and product development, is essentially the same as a portfolio, a project portfolio. So quite a bit to take away from that. So thank you for attending. I hope today's webinar was useful. Please follow up with any questions, inquiries, and or if you're interested in a free trial. So thank you for attending.